This virtual festival has been organized by Youth Celebrate Diversity, and the festival is proudly sponsored by Boeing.
Hello, Jamie.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm amazing. Let's just jump right into it. What is your name and your pronouns?
I am Jamie Ryan. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them, and I identify as non-binary.
Great. I'm Raina. I'm the panelist. I use she, her pronouns. Just a quick introduction. And on to the questions. So, how should people navigate using they, he pronouns like you do? Because a lot of people do not understand how they should interchange with those pronouns.
Right. I think first off for they, them pronouns, it's really important to understand and acknowledge that times have obviously changed. And whether you realize it or not, you use they, them pronouns for people all the time. Like someone across the street, you don't know their gender, you're just like, oh, that cool shirt or something. And it's also really important to understand that not every non-binary will just use they, them pronouns or use they, them pronouns at all. We can use any pronouns, and it doesn't change our gender identity. It doesn't invalidate our gender identity. And even though it may be tempting, so to speak, to use one set of pronouns when someone has two, it is more valuable to interchange between them. And it's more valuable to practice using both because it can really help you understand the need for gendering people correctly and using the right pronouns, even if you don't quite understand them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important, especially in today's climate, because there are more and more people coming out as non-binary and transgender because they feel safer now, and hopefully they are able to live as their true, authentic selves. What does NB mean for those who don't know?
NB is basically a shortened term that has come up in recent years for just non-binary. It's just like, yeah, it's just like non-binary, but in a shortened way, quicker to type, quicker to say. That's all it is.
Okay. So, if you don't mind me asking, what was it like for you to come out to your family?
I actually did not come out to my family as non-binary. I only told my family that I identify as transgender, which I do use that label as well. And it was really hard. It was such an emotional time for me. And even though I didn't quite feel accepted by my family and I didn't feel loved and I didn't feel safe enough to fully explain what it is to be non-binary, I know that I still have those safe places and I still have people who do understand.
Yeah, it's important to find people who love and accept you and people that you can feel comfortable around so that you can talk about these things. Because I know it's hard if you don't have these things to talk about and it just bottles up until you explode. What are some negative stereotypes you hear or just misconceptions about non-binary folk?
I think one of the biggest stereotypes about non-binary people is that we are all assigned female at birth and dress androgynously, like button up and bow tie and like slacks. That's not how we all are. Being non-binary, there's a huge spectrum of non-binary identities. And, you know, it's important to understand that just because you have this vision of what it means to be non-binary and what a non-binary person looks like, that doesn't mean that all non-binary people look like that. Non-binary people can, in the eyes of society, look like a cis person or someone who dresses very according to their gender, but assigned at birth. But that doesn't matter because a non-binary person is a non-binary person no matter how they look or how they present.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And though I'm not binary, I see a lot of non-binary people dress in very different ways because expression and gender are two different things. Building off that last idea, what best can people do to support you and be allies?
I think as a non-binary person, it's important for me to people to just accept me for who I am and understand that regardless of my pronouns and my sexuality and my presentation, I am non-binary and nothing will ever change that. Even if one day I look particularly masculine or I look particularly feminine, that doesn't mean I will ever be a man or a woman. I'm always going to be non-binary, and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, how would you describe gender? Just in general, what's your definition?
To me, gender is whatever people want it to be, whatever an individual wants it to be. Personally, I don't really believe in gender. I think gender is a social construct.
Mhm.
And I think that gender is just a way for society to put people in boxes because it's easier for them to understand that way. But I think that regardless of how we all grew up, gender is just, no one can define gender for you. Only you can define gender, especially for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've seen social constructs like gender before, and it's just been so ingrained in society that that's what we just think is normal. But thank you for that. Again, if you don't mind me asking, how does sexual orientation work for a non-binary person like yourself?
Me, personally, I identify as bisexual. I don't really care what someone is. I just found that I'm more attracted to femininity. And that's how I define my bisexuality. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're feminine, I'll probably be attracted to you. But there's a lot to this question. This is a wide array of opinions in the community, but I've met non-binary people who identify as bisexual or pansexual or even lesbian or gay. And when it comes to that, I think we need to just talk to our non-binary peers and understand why they label that way and how they process their own sexuality, because we can't gatekeep people from identifying a certain way, and we just need to let them label as they're comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know this is a question you probably always get, but have you always known you were non-binary?
No. Up until the end of 8th grade, I identified as a cis woman because I didn't know there was any other thing to identify as. And at first, I didn't believe in being non-binary. I didn't think it was possible, and I didn't think it was allowed. But eventually, the more I got exposed to the gender spectrum, I started to realize, I don't have to fit into this box. I can be who I am, and I can accept that.
Yeah, because I know when I was younger, I didn't know that being trans was possible. Like, I didn't know I could identify as a woman and whatnot. And I was like, one of those people who were like, oh, there's only 2 genders. You can't change your gender, until I found out, like, you can. Gender is a social construct, and whatever. It really doesn't matter. How do you feel being labeled wrong or with the wrong, like, pronouns?
It's hard. It's really hard when people just don't understand. And it feels like, for me, someone trying to put me in a box. And someone just trying to keep me out of being who I am. And mistakes happen. People can make mistakes in your pronouns or your gender, but it's just a heavy thing to go through. And sometimes being misgendered can ruin your day. But as long as people are trying and making the steps to just gender people correctly, then that's the biggest thing. That's what's going to bring real change.
I absolutely agree with that. I know how hard it is for me personally to be misgendered, because it does happen somewhat often. But of course, mistakes do happen, but there's a difference when you're purposely being misgendered because they're transphobic, or just a mistake among friends or family.
Yeah.
How do you choose to express yourself? Like, through clothing or through makeup?
I express myself across the entire gender board. when I first came out as non-binary, I really tried to like shove myself into that big non-binary stereotype, just androgynous person wearing a button-up. And since I've kind of strayed away from that, I've been trying to reclaim my femininity with makeup and more feminine clothing because I was so lost and I was so stuck in being what society wanted me to be as a non-binary person. But now I'm moving away from that. I wear makeup a lot. It's become a huge part of who I am and how I present. And I hope one day I'll get to the place where I can wear typically feminine clothing in public again.
Yeah, that's so important to understand that even though someone may identify as male, they can wear clothing that is generally meant for females, I guess. Because obviously gender has no clothing, but there is this idea that if you're a certain gender, you have to wear a certain type of clothing.
Absolutely.
Which is where a lot of people get lost when they're transitioning. What would you say to those who say there's only two genders and non-binary is fake and blah, blah, blah?
I just say to them, I'm sorry you grew up in a society that forced you to believe that. Because we don't choose to internalize that. That's just pressed upon us from a very young age, you know? When you think about gender reveal parties that set things on fire, like pink is a girl color, blue is a boy color, that's the stuff that makes people believe that. And everything in this world is given a gender, but I promise to people who believe that, you don't have to live that way. And over time, when you expose yourself to learning more and educating yourself and surround yourself with more people on the gender spectrum, you'll start to realize that it's not your fault you believe that most of the time. Some people, of course, are stubborn and they just don't want to believe that change is possible, or they don't want to accept change. And it's really hard to be told that your gender is fake. And to do that to someone, to say someone, your gender is invalid, you're not real, it's a horrible thing to do. And anyone who does that willingly, I think they just need to understand that you can try to erase non-binary people, but we will never go silent.
Absolutely. Great explanation. I never thought about wording it like that, but thank you. Let me just... on to the last question. What advice would you give to those who are feeling like they might be non-binary or just trans in general?
Experiment is the biggest thing. Experiment with different pronouns, different presentation and clothing, and ask yourself, what do I want about gender? How do I define gender? And seek the support of other non-binary and trans individuals. One of the most eye-opening things for me when it came to my gender and my presentation was getting more involved with queer culture, especially the drag community. I didn't start reclaiming my femininity until I started getting into doing drag as a drag queen and also as a drag king. And now that I've involved myself in such a big part of LGBTQ plus culture, I feel so loved and welcome, and I feel so brave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, immersing yourself in that culture is so important because you understand from different viewpoints what it may be like to be trans or a trans woman or non-binary person, or just to be a different sexuality and do drag. I know for a lot of people that's what they do, but I know a lot of trans women also do drag, like myself. Because that's really how you immerse yourself in that culture. You try and learn from others.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you were experimenting with pronouns, how did you start with that? Did you tell your friends first?
Yeah, I remember the first time I started experimenting in the summer between 8th grade and freshman year. It was so long ago. I told two of my closest friends, one of them a trans man and the other a trans woman, I think I might be non-binary, or at first I identified as gender fluid. And I started out using they, them, and she, her pronouns because I was still really clinging to being cis because I had so much internalized transphobia to get through. Mm-hmm. And eventually I started experimenting further. I stopped using she, her pronouns in freshman year. For a while I only used they, them, and I started using he, him as well, I think in my sophomore year. And Yeah, I just told my friends, I told my teachers, and I just experimented and I listened to myself be referred with different pronouns in order to figure out this is comfortable, this is me.
Absolutely. That is so amazing. And it looks like we are a little short on time, but I'd like to thank you so much for joining me and telling me about your story.
Of course, anytime. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Have a wonderful day.
You too.